Good afternoon. It's 2 o'clock. I am Jess Eschbaugh. I am the faculty representative to the Campus Carry Committee, and I greet you this afternoon. There are few other topics on the agenda of the faculty this year that galvanize and provoke more heated debate and opinion than what we're dealing with this semester in terms of Campus Carry. I want only to add one personal note. This committee has been functioning since September 11th. And I want to say that the information that we're getting from our chair and the chief of the UNT police force has been very reassuring and very helpful at all times. I understand personally that there are very few faculty here and elsewhere who want guns in our classrooms and in our offices. Unfortunately, that ship has sailed. It is the law of the land. So as you know, our function on Campus Carry is to identify, among other things, is to identify areas on campus where we may have an option of restricting weapons, guns. I would also add on a personal note that UNT, the state of Texas, is not the first to go through this drill, to go through this exercise. There are other states that permit it. The statistics are, at least to me personally, reassuring that it is not the permit holders that pose the problems in most instances. And I think that this will be developed and made clear to us this afternoon. So with those personal remarks out of the way, I want to introduce the chairman of our committee, Eric Fritsch.
Thank you. I am. I'll just put this one back up here. All right. Thank you. I appreciate you coming. Just as a way of introduction, some members of our task force are present, so I want to make sure that they're initially recognized here. We have Darlene Callahan from Space Management. We have Ed Reynolds, Chief of Police. We have Mo McGinnis, Dean of Students. We have Brad Scott from Risk Management. And we have Lieutenant David Owens from UNTPD, and you've already met Jesse. I'm Eric Fritsch. I'm Chair of the Campus Carry Task Force. I'm also Professor and Chair of the Department of Criminal Justice here at UNT. I've been here 19 years. So here's what our plan is for today, is that we're going to kind of go through a PowerPoint presentation. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes, providing you with data and statistics regarding the campus carry law requirements, CHL holders, what we know about CHL holders, estimated impact on UNT, and then we're really going to open it up for questions and comments and concerns from the people that are present today. This is being live streamed, so it's being videoed and videotaped, so it's available on our website at a later time. So we will have microphone wranglers that when it comes question time, you'll need to speak into a microphone so that it's picked up on the video. But just as a way of introduction, kind of our purpose here is to start and to continue what we refer to as the consultative process. We're a 23-member task force appointed by the president. We have been meeting, as Jesse said, since September 11th. We meet every other Friday. And the committee really has a wide representation from the university community. We have people like myself, professor and chair. We have Jess on the committee, who's a professor, but also represents faculty senate. We have staff senate represented. We have 2 members from the Student Government Association represented on the committee. We have the Graduate Student Council represented on the committee. Finley Graves, our provost, is on the committee. And then a whole host of administrators on campus are also, from space management to the police department to risk management, dean of students, student affairs, housing, et cetera, are all on it. But we felt strongly early on that although we kind of represented campus, that was kind of insufficient. We really needed to reach out and hear from the campus community, the larger campus community, and that's why we're here today. I'll do the presentation, then we'll open it up for questions and comments. And this is now my 6th town hall meeting, and I haven't gotten to use the cool laser pointer, so I just wanted to do that real quick for no apparent reason than to use the cool laser pointer. That's kind of what we're going to do. I kind of already mentioned it. We're going to overview the campus carry law requirements so it's clear to everyone what the law requires us as UNT to do, and we'll talk about how we're approaching it. Since the law specifically applies to CHL holders, we'll talk about the requirements in Texas, at least give you a thumbnail sketch of the requirements to be a CHL holder in this state. We'll talk about the data, so what we know about CHL holders in this state, and then the estimated impact on UNT. So first is campus carry law requirements. So what does the law require us to do? And we'll go through kind of various slides detailing this. And Dr. Finley Graves, he's our provost, so he's here as well. I introduced the members of the task force. So campus carry, just stepping back for a few moments on the campus carry law requirements. This is something that has been addressed by our legislature in previous legislative sessions, and the bills have failed. This legislative session, it passed. It was enacted into law, signed by our governor, and it takes effect August 1 of 2016. So just to kind of give you our time frame is, our task force, the charge from the president for our task force is to develop a draft policy for campus carry, and that has specific requirements tied to it. We're going to draft that policy. It's covered in a later slide, but we'll draft that policy, not the draft policy, just the timeline. We will give it to the president around December 15th. He will then review it, make any changes he wants to make to it. It then goes to our Board of Regents for final approval, amendment, and then final approval in February 2016. At that point in time, the campus carry policy will be final. So from February 2016 to its start date, August 1, 2016, is when the kind of training and education process will start on campus, where we'll involve UNTPD, Dean of Students, risk management, others on campus to make sure that everyone has accurate information about the policy and what the policy requires, its restrictions, et cetera. So that's kind of the time frame of it. What does the law allow? That's the third bullet point right there. It allows concealed handgun license holders, so CHL, is what we refer to it as, CHL holders, to carry their concealed handgun on campus beginning August 1, 2016. There is sometimes a blurring of what is called campus carry, which is what we are talking about today, which is taking effect August 1, 2016, and what is sometimes referred to as open carry. Open carry is becoming law in this state. It is taking effect January 1, 2016. And what that allows, it allows concealed handgun license holders to open carry. So in a holster on the side, like you'd see a police officer doing. That is becoming law in the state. It will not exist on the UNT campus. When the law was passed, it specifically excluded institutions of higher education from open carry locations. So we're not talking about open carry. We're talking about campus carry because that's what's going to impact us here. The last thing there in bold, UNT is going to abide by the requirements of the law. And I just want to say that at the beginning of this presentation is because that's our charge from the president, is that we have to fit the policy within the intent of the law. And so we'll talk about what the requirements of the law are, but we are going to abide by the requirements of the law. There's been some chatter regarding our web form that we've received that people want us to fight this law and not allow guns on campus. And as Jesse said, which really largely stole my line because that's usually what I say. So instead of the ship has sailed, the train has left the station. How about that? So the train has left the station. UNT opposed campus carry. The Student Government Association opposed campus carry when it was going through the legislature. Reality is the legislature passed the law. We have to abide by that law, and that's where we're sitting right now. And so what does it require? Well, I like redundancy at times, especially for really critical facts, because I want to make sure it's clear what the law requires. And I've already said it, and I'm going to say it again, because it's the first bullet point on this slide. But it specifically applies to CHL holders. They will be allowed to carry a concealed handgun on campus beginning August 1st, 2016. But it does allow, as Jesse alluded to, it does allow UNT and any state university to carve out what just so we can have a conversation about them, we're calling gun-free zones. That's not what the legislation says, but that everybody can kind of conjure up in their mind what that means. So we are allowed to carve out and create gun-free zones on campus. So those are areas in which concealed handgun license holders will not be able to carry their handguns and their concealed handguns. But, as the last bullet point says, but those restrictions, those gun-free zones can't be so broad that they nullify the intent of law. And that's our challenge. And that's what we want to hear from you when it's time to open comments is what do you consider and what should we consider as a committee to be gun-free zones. Just realize that those have to be strategically selected and they cannot be so broad that it nullifies the intent of the law. So the example I've been using in every single one of these forums is classrooms. We can't just say we're not allowing it in classrooms because it nullifies the intent of the law, because then concealed handgun license holders who are students can't go to class. Faculty who are concealed handgun license holders can't go to class. So it nullifies the intent of the law, so it's not going to pass legal muster. And so we can carve out gun-free zones strategically. We have to have justification for that, but again, can't be so broad that it nullifies the intent of the law. Last thing, which I didn't mention, but in the middle bullet point there, is that just like you may have seen at some bars, et cetera, we have to give effective notice. So there will be signs placed if it's a building or if it's a location in a building that we decide is a gun-free zone, then signs will go up on those buildings. And so it's a couple slides ahead, but that's the effective notice. So we have to give by law, and again, we're talking about campus carry law requirements, we have to give by law the concealed handgun license holders effective notice of where they cannot carry their weapons. I put in here such as collegiate sporting events, and the only reason why I put it in there is currently it's restricted by law. So if you have a CHL right now, because CHLs existed since 1997, you cannot carry that in a collegiate sporting event. It's specifically excluded by law. So collegiate sporting events is not something we as the task force have decided upon. I just put it in there as an example because it's currently prohibited for CHL holders to carry in collegiate sporting events. All right, so after consulting, so I referred to the consultative process. So, we have a 23-member committee. This is now the 6th of 7 town hall meetings. We also have a website, campuscarry.unt.edu, that has information about what we are doing and the task force members and frequently asked questions and things like that. But it also has a share your thoughts form, and we've been getting a lot of thoughts from people. It goes to all 23 members of us. We also have a website, campuscarry.unt.edu, that comes to all 23 of us. We're taking all that into account in drafting this policy that then, as I've already mentioned, goes to the president in the middle of December. The law also allows us to carve out specific rules and provisions regarding residence halls. And we do have a subcommittee. Some members of that subcommittee are present today, so they can talk to if we have questions about residence halls and how we're going to handle that, or how we think we're going to handle that. That can be addressed then. Again, redundancy sometimes a good thing, and bold. This law does not take effect until August 1 of 2016. We have time to put the policy in place. We have time to put the training and education in place to be ready for it to roll out in August 1, 2016, which is why we started early this fall. We've already done that. That's the effective notice. A few other things, just kind of more process-related things, but again, I want to make sure everybody's clear on what the law is requiring us to do. It requires Board of Regents approval. It's already scheduled to go to them in their February meeting. So February 2016, Board of Regents will get our policy that we've sent to the president, and then they can make any amendments to it, and all the amendments are final. So they are the final decision makers on the campus carry policy. That will go into effect February 2016. We obviously have to let everybody know about it, so we have to publish it to students, to employees, faculty, staff. We have to put it on our website. And then in 2016, September 1, 2016, and then every 2 years thereafter, we basically have to provide the policy to the state legislature. We have to identify our quote-unquote gun-free zones, and we have to provide justification for why those gun-free zones exist. So that's why we're saying that they have to be strategic, because we have to have justification for those gun-free zones to exist. Some things that aren't in the law, but things that I think are important for people to understand regarding campus carry and CHL is, first, we, UNT, we cannot revoke the right of a CHL holder to carry on campus. That right resides exclusively with the Texas Department of Public Safety. They handle all revocations and suspensions. So we do not have the ability through the provost's office or the dean of students or through any process on campus to revoke the right of someone who has a CHL to carry on campus. Once the law is effective, there still will be a couple of things that will be against the law. It's a concealed handgun. So any brandishment of it, any plain view of it, etc., UNT Police Department can step in and take action. So if it's not concealed, it will be against the law. In addition, if they go into a gun-free zone, again, we've got to have effective notice, but if we've provided effective notice and someone is a concealed handgun license holder carrying in that location, it is equally against the law, and UNTPD can take action. I think we've already covered the third one, open carry, but again, we're not going to have open carry on campus. Institutions of higher education are specifically excluded from open carry. We'll have concealed carry. Open carry will not exist. And we don't have, we, UNT, we don't have the legal authority to require a CHL holder to self-identify. So we will not know who has a CHL and who is carrying on campus. We are asking, because we, 23-member committee, also have 2 members of the Office of General Counsel, UNT's legal team, on the committee. We have asked the Office of General Counsel if we can ask people to self-identify regarding residence halls, but that's a legal decision that has to be made by the Office of General Counsel. But in general, we do not have the authority to require people to self-identify. So that's the requirements of the law. Now we'll spend a little bit of time focusing on CHL holders and the requirements for CHL holders, and I'm carrying around the PowerPoint, but I don't need it. So, basic requirements, you got to be 21 years of age. All right? So, 21 years of age unless you're in active military in order to initially qualify for a CHL. You got to go through classroom training. You got to go through a written examination. You got to go through a proficiency examination where you discharge your handgun adequately, and all that must be done by a DPS, Texas Department of Public Safety certified instructor. And then there's a whole lot of requirements regarding that individual from a criminal standpoint. And so this isn't all of it. There are a lot of details to who can have a CHL and who cannot, and the suspension and revocation process. And so I summed these 2 slides up, and the point that I'm trying to make to you and to others in the other town halls is that CHL holders are exceedingly law-abiding citizens, and they have to be to get the license, and they have to be to maintain the license. And so no felony convictions, no Class A or B convictions in the last 5 years, not currently charged with an A or B misdemeanor, not currently under felony indictment. And so if you know the way that our categories of offenses go in this state, the only thing lower than any of that is a C misdemeanor. And a C misdemeanor is something you get a ticket for. It's a citation offense. And you pay up to a $500 fine. So it pretty much covers everything else, is exclusionary from a CHL standpoint. Not a fugitive from justice. That gets a little bit smaller font size, but not a chemically dependent person, capable of exercising sound judgment with respect to the proper use and storage of the handgun, no material misrepresentation during the application process. Texas Department of Public Safety conducts a background investigation. So basically, it's a process. It's a fairly lengthy and involved process. And again, from the initial requirements, you have to be a law-abiding citizen to get it. And if for some reason then you mess up and you get arrested for driving while intoxicated, which is a misdemeanor, you then will have your license revoked by the Texas Department of Public Safety. So you got to be law-abiding, you got to stay law-abiding to keep it. Says there for additional information on eligibility, ineligibility factors, and it's got this big long website. What I do is I just go into Google and I put Texas Department of Public Safety concealed handgun license, and it pops up all the rules, everything you ever want to know about concealed handgun license. It's all right there on the DPS website. And again, that doesn't cover all of it. That's kind of the thumbnail sketch of the requirements to get and to keep a CHL. There's a lot more complexity to that, but we got a short presentation, so wanted to at least give you some sufficient details on what's required. What do we know about CHL holders? We know generally that 3% of the Texas population has a CHL, so that's kind of what some refer to as the 3% rule. So 3% of Texas residents have a CHL. They have a tendency to be older. 86% of them are 30 years of age or older. 2/3 of them are 40 years of age or older. One thing that DPS does, which I think is a very good thing, is that, and it's on the same website that I just mentioned, is they track convictions. Okay? So Texas Department of Public Safety has all the conviction data. And they track convictions, and they separate that out between CHL holders and non-CHL holders. And so what this graph is showing is this. 2013, when I built the PowerPoint, which was 3 weeks ago, 2013 is the latest we have. Criminal justice professor, that's the way it goes. We're usually running about 2 years behind on data. That's the way that it is. 2014 might be there right now, but when I built this, 13 was there. And the latest we had is that of all the criminal convictions, so everything we've got in this state, every criminal activity we've got in this state, we had 51,000 convictions in this state in 2013 for criminal activity. Of those 51,000 convictions, 158 of them were CHL holders. Again, back to the point regarding the eligibility requirements, exceedingly law-abiding citizens. The conviction rates demonstrate that. 51,000 offenses, convictions, 158, 1/3 of 1%, are CHL holders or were CHL holders in 2013. What we heard in the initial, and we've heard it in subsequent town hall meetings, is really the concern that having guns on campus is going to lead to an increase in violence on campus, that these people are going to act violently. And so people start talking about active shooter situations, et cetera. And so we put this slide together. And when we talk, and from a criminal justice standpoint, when you talk about violent crime, normally people talk about the Uniform Crime Reports, which is established by the FBI. And we usually talk about 4 violent crimes. That's not all of them, but we usually talk about 4 of them. We talk about murder, we talk about sexual assault, we talk about robbery, and we talk about aggravated assault. All those are represented on that slide, and then terroristic threat is added there as well. And so what we did is we took out those 51,000 convictions. By offense, we took out these particular violent crimes, which are the major violent crimes in this state. Total convictions in this state, 2013, that column there adds up to 13,746. Okay, so 13,746 criminal convictions for, we'll just say, violent crime, for a general term. How many of those were CHL holders? 31. 31. So 0.225% of the violent criminal convictions in this state in 2013 were committed by CHL holders. So again, exceedingly law-abiding citizens, very unlikely that they're going to commit a violent act from the conviction data that I just presented. So what do we expect here? Well, we don't have this requirement to self-identify, so we don't know how many CHL holders we have on campus. But if we take our 42,000 people, about 37,000 students, about 5,000 employees, so about 42,000 people, we apply that 3% rule. 3% of Texas residents have a CHL. we're looking at about 1,260, so 1,250 CHL holders at UNT. That's a rough estimate. We are focusing, and as I said, we have a special subcommittee that's looking at residence halls specifically. We don't expect there to be many students living in our residence halls that have a CHL. Why? One, most of them are under 21 years of age. So we got 6,200 students living in our dorms, our residence halls. I was told dorms is an old term, but that's what I lived in when I was in college, but residence halls. So we got 6,200 students living in residence halls. Only about 500 of them are over 21. So most of them don't even qualify under the initial eligibility of age, let alone criminal activity and all the other stuff that is required. And since that one slide showed that 86% are over 30, we don't expect many students in our residence halls to be CHL holders. We can talk during questions and comments about strategies that other states have done. The reality is this: we as a committee haven't made decisions. We're in the consultative process. We want to hear from y'all. I'm from Texas, I could say that, y'all, before we draft that policy. And so we don't have the list of gun-free zones. We don't know what we're going to do with the residence halls. We can talk about what other states have done with residence halls, but we haven't made those decisions. Also, campus carry is new. Concealed handgun license, CHL is not. It's been around since 1997 in the state. People have been wandering around the state of Texas with concealed handguns. So we asked UNTPD to pull up any records they have of anybody being on campus, any cases of people on campus who are concealed handgun license holders, being arrested or whatever for having a concealed handgun in a prohibited place, because right now it's prohibited. And didn't find any records, so no records of concealed handgun license holders coming onto campus, all the way dating back to 1997. Again, it applies specifically to UNT, but I think it also shows that exceedingly law-abiding citizen concept as well that we've covered. As Jesse said, we're not alone. We are one of 8 states that have campus carry. Colorado has the longest history. So Colorado has had it since 2003. So we looked at their 2 major state universities. So Colorado State University, which is over 30,000 students. It's a little bit smaller than ours, but it's still a large state university. And then the big CU campus, so University of Colorado Boulder. So since 2003, so about 12-year history, no incidents of a CHL holder at Colorado State University either displaying or discharging a handgun. At Colorado Boulder, 1 incident, an employee at the dental school showing her weapon to a colleague. It accidentally discharged. She was fired. That's the only incident. So 2 major state universities in 1 state that's had it for the longest, since 2003, and we have 1 incident. So we don't see it majorly transforming this university or really changing much on this university campus. Although, as Jesse said, we understand that there is a great deal of anxiety about how campus carry is going to play out on this campus. So where do we go from here? I mean, your presence here tells me that you're interested in this topic and you're interested in what's going on, and I don't want it to just end today after we're done answering questions and everybody walks off. So realize that we want this to be as transparent of a process as possible. That's why we're having these open forums. That's why we're videotaping them, so they're live streaming out to anybody that wants to watch them. They're being recorded, so they sit there and anybody can watch them at a later time. So we want this to be as transparent as possible. We will continue to meet every other Friday throughout the semester until we have the draft policy done, and we will be providing updates on the website so that we can share that with the campus community, so campuscarry.unt.edu. Second thing is that if you don't have all of your comments made today, or some magic like me, stroke of genius, hits you at 2 o'clock in the morning, and you're like, man, I wish I would have said that. Well, go to the website, share your thoughts as a web form, fill it out, get that information to us, or use our use our email address, campuscarry@unt.edu, and that will go to the 23 members of the committee as well. So doesn't end here. If you got additional thoughts to share with us, we're going to continue to gather those thoughts during this process, and then we'll take all that into consideration when we sit down to draft that policy for the president that's due in the middle of December. Thank you for listening to me. I know that was a lot of stuff really, really fast, but I wanted to make sure we give lots of time to questions and comments from the audience. So it's open. It's open to you all now. If I'm not the right person to answer the question, then we have members of the committee here that may stand up at the microphone and answer the question. Yes, ma'am.
Hi.
Hello.
My name is Tracy Everbach. I am a tenured faculty member here, and I want to thank you for the work that you and the task force have done. I do have a prepared statement I'd like to read.
Okay.
I'm a tenured faculty member. I'd like to point out that when I accepted a job at UNT in 2004, I never agreed to teach classes, have office hours, or consult with anyone who was armed. To me, this law and its provisions violate my right to be safe in my work environment. Now, I realize that the task force did not pass this law. I realize the legislature did, and Governor Abbott signed it into law. I understand it is now law. I don't plan to defy the law. That said, I want to voice the following. A big concern for me is the prioritizing of the Second Amendment over the First Amendment. How are students, professors, and staff supposed to feel free to speak in classes, in meetings, or in other university forums, knowing that others are armed? We also have no way of knowing exactly who is armed. As you said in your presentation, we are not allowed to ask, so we don't know. Does the university really expect students to be able to share ideas freely in classes, knowing their professor may be armed? I can candidly say that I have no idea how to foster an atmosphere of respect in the classroom with firearms present. How can I respect my students, or they respect me, if we don't know whether the other is packing? I'm not saying that people on campus will suddenly become violent because firearms are present, but I see a potential for accidents when people with only 4 hours of CHL training are carrying around deadly weapons. I also see a great potential for intimidation of others. Finally, I am not sure if you're aware that 2/3 of gun deaths are suicides. That was not addressed at all in your presentation. That means with easier access to firearms, the potential for people to kill themselves on our campus will rise. I recently looked at the UNT crime log. I noticed an attempted suicide on campus on September 30th. How many more of these are going to happen, and how many will be successful if we have more guns on campus? The university needs to look closely at this law and its consequences, which could include more suicides on campus, more fear among students, staff, and faculty, lower enrollment as students transfer to universities in other states or to private universities that do not have these laws, a loss of faculty who will go to universities where they can teach without sanctioned firearm presence in classrooms and offices.
Thank you. Next. Yes. You got to talk on a mic. All right, thank you.
Thank you. I noticed in the presentation that by law, athletic facilities or athletic events are automatically exempted from campus carry. Is that correct?
Collegiate sporting events is what the law says.
Okay. Yeah, in the determination of on-campus areas that are now going to be exempted, will those facilities be somehow or another factored in other words, reducing the amount of area that can be exempted from campus carry?
I'm not, can you rephrase that, or we take?
Yeah, let me see if I can figure out a better way.
I followed you all the way until like the last couple sentences.
So if there is a percentage, let's say, of a campus that can be exempted from campus carry, the automatic inclusion of athletic events, such as the Coliseum, Apogee Stadium, whatever it happens to be, will that be factored into any percentages that might be exempted, reducing the amount of area on campus and other areas that might be exempted?
Yeah, so first, the law, the legislation doesn't have anything about the percentage in which a campus can be classified as gun-free. It just says you can carve out, they don't use the term, we do, gun-free zones, but they can't be so broad that they nullify the intent of the law, which is to allow CHL holders to carry on campus. And so we don't have a magic percentage that we're working on, but we do have questions that we've posed to the Office of General Counsel for input to us about what is a collegiate sporting event. Because clearly it's NCAA-related events, but does it also include intramurals and things that are going on in the Pole Recreation Center? And so we got to figure that out. We have to get input from them about really what the definition of collegiate sporting events are. And then the decision has to be made regarding, is the building a gun-free zone 24/7, 365, or is it only during those times in which those collegiate sporting events are taking place? Did that answer your question? Kind of. If you want to follow up to that, I can get you a microphone. All right. Nobody's bringing you mic, so I'm going to bring you mine so we can get it on the thing. Here you go.
I guess it points to a different question that hasn't been addressed, and I don't know that it is addressed anywhere in the stipulations or the guidelines. But I'm assuming that as you're considering and trying to second guess, maybe as much as anything else, what is going to be the limit of what can be exempted on campus, unless you have a crystal ball or tea leaves, I'm guessing that this is all kind of a guess on your part as a group. If there is kind of this magical percentage or areas of exemption or that could be qualified for exemption, whether they're classrooms, whether they're office spaces, whether they're dormitories, whether they're cafeterias, athletic facilities, so forth and so on, that my concern is that the exemption of athletic facilities during athletic events doesn't become the benchmark, that becomes the limitation, and that as we consider and as you consider other areas, that doesn't become a kind of a fearful barrier between exempting other areas or trying to determine other appropriate areas.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And so what I'm hearing, keep the microphone because I may mess it up, but what I'm hearing is that collegiate sporting events or anything that's already prohibited by law should really just be taken off the table when we're looking at gun-free zone.
That's correct.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question regarding the gun-free zones. I think many of us as faculty have had experiences working with students where there was potential for feeling endangered. I myself have had this happen multiple times. And of course, I didn't know if they were packing or not. I'm assuming they weren't. But I would like to know, sometimes we are aware of when these situations will happen, when we have to confront a student about cheating or something more dangerous, if they're showing signs of being dangerous. Will there be areas on campus where we can go to have those meetings and have those conversations, which would be gun-free zones, rather than inviting those students into our office, which is not a gun-free zone?
I don't know, and I haven't heard it. It's an excellent point. The students stumped me yesterday because this is our sixth one, so you think you've kind of heard most of it. I think it's an excellent point. What happens is with this, and you may be wondering, like, why isn't he taking notes? I mean, we will transcribe the video, so we'll keep. So what will go on the list is the consideration for us to carve out, kind of like you do with open space areas. When you have offices that are open space, you have a confidential area to have that conversation with students. Will there be gun-free offices, so to speak, office locations that are empty that can then be reserved for those times? think it's an excellent point. Hadn't heard it. We'll definitely put it on the list for consideration. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Could you explain why offices are de facto already being talked about as excluded from the exclusion? They're not classrooms, and I know, like what you said, I have felt intimidated by students multiple times, including inside my office. And I've had students that I felt were violent or, made me feel fearful. And so why is it that the offices are off the table?
I don't know that they are off the table so much that the decision of the committee's been made that they're off the table. I've used them as examples because from my viewpoint, just as chair of the committee, is that that nullifies the intent of the law. Because what you've done by saying you cannot carry in your office is you have then taken I don't know how many faculty members we have, but then you've taken the 2,500 faculty members, some of them which are CHL holders, and you've violated their right, and you've talked about Second Amendment, First Amendment, but you violated their right to carry on campus. To me, that nullifies the intent of the law, and I don't think it will pass through, the committee, but which, again, we haven't created a list yet, but I don't think it passed through the committee, and I don't think it passed then through President Smatras or through the Board of Regents, because it is too broad, and that's what the law specifically states, is it just can't be too broad.
So I have a follow-up question then, which is, I know this is a little bit of looking into the future, so you can't definitively answer this, but let's say that come August of 2016, a faculty member decides to declare their office a gun-free zone. Are they breaking the law?
They're not breaking the law, they're violating university policy.
Okay.
Yes. Because the policy will have the gun-free zones noted in it. And then we have asked for, again, we're working in consultation with the Office of General Counsel, but we have asked for the ability within the policy for the policy to be dynamic, not stagnant, and just sits there, and here's the 12 places that are gun-free zones, or how many places there are, is that, one, we have buildings going up. We need to have a way to add things, a process, not, so a committee, whatever it happens to be, but we've asked for the policy to be written so that we can have a process in place to add areas to the gun-free zone as the campus changes, as new buildings go up, as this building was used for this purpose, now it's being used for another purpose. We heard in a meeting the other day that the Child Development Lab is moving out of Matthews Hall, which has always been used as an example of a place that will be a gun-free zone. It is being moved over to Mean Green Village in an independent building. So, it could have signs up on it August 1 if it's still there, but then it changes purpose. We need a dynamic policy, and we also need a policy that allows for, we have hundreds of events on campus, and we need a policy that's dynamic enough that there is a way in which you can request for the event to be a temporary gun-free zone. So maybe this location that we're sitting in is not a gun-free zone, but due to the type and nature of the event that's going to occur in here from 6 to 9 p.m. on Thursday night, there's a process in place in which we can define it as a gun-free zone. But if it's not on that list, it's basically a violation of policy is what it becomes.
Is it my turn? I guess I'm just echoing the thoughts around the office area. I'm also a faculty member here and have felt threatened by students in my office, and also our department had a student kill himself via gun this year, a suicide. And I understand that maybe banning guns in all offices then violates the spirit of the law. I'm curious why it can't be up to the discretion of the faculty member. If a faculty member has no problem with guns in their offices, they don't need to address it. They are just allowed to have students with CHLs in their office. But why we can't empower professors to make that decision? I can ban cell phones and laptops and gum from my classrooms, but from my own office, which I understand is university property but feels very, very personal, I don't understand why we can't leave it up, or can we leave it up to the discretion of individual faculty members to address whether or not they want to allow CHLs in their offices during office hours?
I don't have a definitive answer, because it'd be a question that would have to go to the Office of General Counsel, and we can definitely ask them. I would venture to say that it nullifies the intent of the law, that by giving the power to the faculty to identify their offices or their classrooms as gun-free zones, then nullifies the intent of the law, which the intent of the law is to have CHL holders conceal their guns and bring them onto campus. And then that, depending on the magnitude of that, it could be considered as nullifying the law. I mean, we can definitely ask the Office of General Counsel for their input on it, and will. We're sending them questions all the time, but that's just me giving you what I think they would say. But
I have one follow-up. You know, all of that presentation was very logical and wonderful. Not one of it actually justified the need for CHLs on college campuses. There wasn't a single statistic showing that CHLs actually reduces crime or intervenes in an active shooter situation. And when I think about in my classroom, what makes me nervous is that there's one entrance into my classroom. There's no peephole. I'm lucky to have a lock on my door. I know a lot of faculty members do not. And I'm wondering if there's other ways, if we're really thinking about this in this crisis mode, which honestly, I'm much more afraid of accidental shootings and suicides than I am the active shooter. But if I think that's the emotion driving this bill, what other things are we doing to make our classrooms and our offices safer? I mean, I've thought about this. If I'm on lockdown, how do I know that it's a police officer knocking on my door telling me it's clear? I can't verify him visually at all, or her visually at all. And so I know I would feel better if we had the ability to lock our classrooms to be able to visually verify people in the incident that we go on lockdown and I'm in my office or in a classroom. That would make me feel safer. So I'm just curious, like, in the spirit of this law is to make this campus safer. Are there other efforts, and this might, I recognize, be outside of like the domain of this committee, but to make classrooms physically safer for us?
I mean, I could make a broad general statement, then I'll see if anybody else wants to make a comment that really has more of the concreteness of what we do on this campus. I know that we do have safety and security seminars that are offered to faculty, staff, and students. I know that when we enact this policy, you know, we have about a 5-month time frame in which we're going to have to put training and education components at all levels, from students, faculty, and staff, regarding the policy, and there will be, in addition, added on to the safety and security seminars, this policy will be integrated into that. We've talked about it being brought up at orientation so students are aware of it. I mean, it's not my area to know the concreteness of what we do on campus for the security of classrooms, so Chief Reynolds may have a few things to say.
The question came up at one of our campus safety and security seminars from a faculty member, was basically if there was an active shooter in a class, the students are going to look at me as leadership since I'm teaching the class, and I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do. So we started working with the provost office to try to develop a training, and I think this is a piece we're going to work on as a small part of the committee, to offer that training out to all faculty on just preparation ideas or thoughts in case there's an incident. And it's not just active shooter. We use that because it's the worst case scenario. But even as basic as you hear the tornado sirens going off, what are you directing your class to do? Because they're going to look at you as leadership in that class and where you want to go, or the fire alarm. And believe it or not, when we have a fire alarm on campus, literally we have to go door to door to make people leave. I mean, I learned it in kindergarten, you know, when the fire alarm goes off, you go, but a lot of folks don't leave the room. So there's a training piece that we're definitely going to have to address, and I think that is a big piece of it, so that, and we've got some really good videos to show some of this information, but I think that's a big piece that we're going to have to roll out during that time between probably February and August. And I suspect that probably the faculty attendance at some of this training will be better than it was before. I know our safety and security seminars, it hasn't been real well attended, but I think there's probably more of an appetite for some of that training now given this. So we look forward to doing that.
Thank you. Yes.
Go ahead.
I'm Professor Benshoff in Media Arts. I've been here for about 15 or 16 years. As far as creating exclusion spaces, you mentioned that we can't do all classrooms. I'm wondering if there's a way to designate some classrooms, depending upon the subject matter. I know a lot of us teach issues that are very much part of controversial social issues that seem to be hot-button issues that make people very angry at times. And so teaching in a classroom like that, it would make more sense maybe to have an exclusion rather than, say, a math class or something that seems fairly a neutral subject matter. Has anybody considered that?
That has been brought up, and it's on a list. It was brought up in a previous town hall on a couple of occasions. And you know, I'm in criminal justice, so I get the controversial topics. We talk about gun control. We talk about the death penalty. We talk about legalization of drugs. We talk about issues that people have very emotional responses to. And we've brought it up. It's been brought up. It's on the list. I think the challenge is, and this is what I said the prior times it's been brought up, is the registrar's office. Because as the chair, I understand a little bit about the complexity of the scheduling process and trying to find a classroom, and then adding a layer onto that this classroom needs to be gun-free as well, may make it a little bit more difficult from a registrar standpoint, but they don't have participation on the committee, so it'd be a question we'd have to ask.
My comment would be not so much that the entire classroom would be gun-free 24/7, but that for the 4 hours I'm teaching my class there, it would be.
So that class would be, okay.
Can I piggyback on Dr. Benshaw? Because we both teach classes where we bring, and so does Jacqueline, where we bring up issues of race and gender and violence and rape. And in my class, not last week, but the week before, I had 2 young men advocate violence against women in my classroom. Now, that is a volatile situation. And if you were going to add guns to that mix, I think that a lot of students would be quite frightened at the prospect, as well as professors, as well as anyone who might be nearby.
Right. Thank you.
I know that there's no percentages that can be applied to the campus footprint about designated areas. But what considerations have been given to the committee to determine what areas to consider for exemption, whether it's classrooms, whether it's open areas? Are these going to be somewhat equally distributed around campus? Can they be equally distributed around campus? What kind of guidance has your committee received in reading the law and the intent of, and trying to interpret the intent of the law in coming up with the gun-free zones?
Specifically on the gun-free zones topic, we've received no guidance. So we've received guidance from the Office of General Counsel regarding these are the elements that must be put in place in the policy. So we have that. But what criteria should we assess in determining whether or not an area should be gun-free or not? We've received no guidance on that. That's when we get done, because we've heard a little here, but we've heard in other places as well, and are keeping a list of these are the areas that our campus community is put on the list for things for us to consider. We as a committee, and as I said before, we haven't created that list yet. We're going to have to create the criterion to look at how are we going to decide what's gun-free and what's not gun-free. As far as how much advice have we received from anybody, we've received none so far.
So is it reasonable for us to expect, based on some of your previous comments, that there can be consideration for designated temporary gun-free zones based on the usage of that area, such as the classrooms that they're talking about, designated specific course numbers, specific designated areas such as the Murkison Performing Arts Center during a concert time, things such as that?
Yes. So that's one of the things that we're looking at and asking for input from the Office of General Counsel is creating a process so a place can, a location can be determined a temporary gun-free zone. So it's not 24/7, 365, but due to the nature of the event. So for example, we're not the first to have this. So some states have it. Some universities have excluded all publicly ticketed venues. So you mentioned the concert halls. So that's how they've excluded. So if it's a publicly ticketed venue, it is gun-free. And so those options do exist, or we expect them to exist. The problem with the courses is that if we were to create a policy and it is allowed to cover courses, that's not going to be done by December 2015, because by my watch, that's like 7 weeks from now. So that's going to have to be something that continues on, which is why we want a dynamic policy that can grow as the university changes. But, I mean, we would have no way of gathering that list and assessing that list and determining whether or not it meets with the intent of the law. But we do want a process in which an area, a location, whatever it happens to be, can be temporarily deemed gun-free for those 3 hours or whatever it happens to be. Yes, ma'am.
I'll pass it right over. I have
just
one
like
other.
to make us. What's wrong with y'all over here? All quiet over there. Okay, and one more thing.
I have a follow-up question.
All of you faculty, all in the back of the room. I'm just pointing that out. Okay. I'm just saying, you know, we probably want our students in the front row, but okay.
My follow-up question is whether there's any data which relates to students choosing to attend universities which have concealed carry and versus universities who don't. The question is, while we're in this period of bolstering enrollment and bolstering everything that we're doing, how this might negatively impact what we're trying to achieve, what we've been working so many years to achieve. Will it impact it? Is there any data from Colorado or any of the other universities? And how might we
I don't know
combat
of any data that exists that demonstrates that this policy impacts enrollment. I think from a method standpoint, it'd be hard to tease out all the confounding factors besides just this policy went into place. I do know anecdotally that we have had students in our forums that are also parents that have expressed concern and that they are going to look at our policy and other policies at other universities in making that decision of where to send their child. I know that I read in one of the articles in the Denton Record Chronicle where somebody put a comment that, you know, depending on what UNT does will depend on whether my child goes there. So anecdotally, there's certainly people that are going to consider that, but as far as data that says this policy has led to a 3% drop in enrollment or no effect in enrollment, I don't know of any data that exists. She got to steal the microphone.
I'm impassioned. If I were a high school senior right now, this would be a key issue. If I had, throughout the years, been doing lockdown drills and having my teachers, you know, teach me what to do in the case of an active shooter, I think it's something that, no matter how we deal with this, I think we need to certainly communicate this to the incoming students, what our policies are. And
right.
It's, you know, I just think it's something that's very much on their hearts, much more than when any of us were in high school. And I think much more than even the students who were in high school 3, 4, 5 years ago. It's a much bigger issue now. Thank you.
I agree with that, and I've done a couple of interviews with high school newspapers that wanted to get information out that they said they sent a lot of students to UNT, so they want to know what UNT is doing about this. And so, and I've already said that we've already at least mentioned in our committee that something has to be integrated into orientation when students come to orientation regarding our campus carry policy.
I have what I think is a quick question. I know it said up there that UNT could not require students to disclose or self-identify whether they have a CHL. Does that mean that I'm in violation of the law if I do ask my students? I mean, I know that the students may not have a legal requirement to be truthful in that answer or to just, they could just ignore the question. But am I in violation of the law by asking a student prior to coming into my office whether they have a gun?
I don't think yeah. You got to look at the boss over there. It's not against the law to ask. I mean, you can ask anything you want to. It's just they do not have to respond. They don't have to respond. They have to respond to the police. So when the police ask, they have to respond. But when anybody else, I mean, you know, we're free to ask the question. It's not going to violate the law. but but we cannot. They don't have to identify themselves. Somebody on this side. All right, thank you.
No, I've been listening to hear some of the whether or not this other issue came up, and that is regarding enforcement, and that was kind of a tie-in to the enforcement. We're going to have gun-free zones. In terms of outside of asking students before they come in whether or not they have guns, how are we going to either monitor or enforce the process?
Well, the only two things that will be against the criminal law will be if the concealed handgun is not concealed. So you have to be able to see it somehow. So,
Okay.
so if they are not, if they are following their law and their training, the law and their training, you won't know that they're carrying a weapon. So if you see someone carrying a weapon that doesn't look like that in a uniform, then we need to contact UNTPD immediately because that is a violation of law.
But I'm thinking that if we have a gun-free zone, even those that have concealed weapons cannot carry them into
Right.
the gun-free zone.
Right, and
Right.
we will have to provide them with effective notice of that. So there'll be signs in that location.
Okay, so there'll be a sign saying, don't come in if you have a concealed
Yeah, it is
handgun.
against the law if you enter this premise
And
with the
so
concealed
then it's
handgun.
up to if someone identify or asks someone if they have a gun, which you said is okay.
I said it's not against the law.
Okay, well, if
I
they.
wasn't like making a recommendation to do that.
Okay, so if you,
But it's not against the law to ask somebody if they are a CHO holder.
so in that case, you can ask the person if they have a gun and please leave the process, or do you call the police to do that?
If they're in a gun-free zone.
Exactly.
So if you know somebody has a concealed handgun and
Right.
they're in a gun-free zone, then yes,
Right.
the police need to be called. But we've also asked, just because I think it gets to kind of what what's being discussed right now, is we've also asked for the policy to have kind of advice and direction for us as faculty and staff
Exactly.
of what to do and what not to do. So like do's and don'ts, like don't do this type of thing. Because we need training on what we should do in situations in which someone's brandishing a weapon. That's simple. Call them.
That's
But what
simple.
about the more subtle types of things? Or, me personally, I wouldn't ask anybody if they're a CHO holder.
That's
But-
the issue, yes.
But others may want to ask, so then is that something that goes into
Or
policy?
they may be suspicious of a person having a concealed weapon in a gun-free zone. I mean, that's kind of the sticky part, and would have to require some kind of response training.
Right, and if they're like policing research is my main area of research. If UNTPD is like a typical police department, about 15% of their calls for service are suspicious persons. So it's common for them, I'm sure, to get calls that say, this doesn't look right. They're the ones that go and check that out. Yes. Oh, you need a microphone. Sorry.
So, in regards to campus residences, and although there is a very short or small percentages of students that could carry because of the age and everything, is there a possibility of making a request that they would have lockbox, or I'm not sure what the name is, those
Yeah,
boxes where you
hotel
put the guns.
safes.
Thank you.
That's what I've been calling that.
I don't know
That's
what
not the
they're called.
technical term, but
Because I'm concerned, as a mother of a child who is soon going to be a college kid, I would be more concerned of the possibility of a gun being stolen or
right.
misappropriated. I'm sorry.
Right. So here's kind of just, I can tell you we do have a subcommittee that's going to assess it, and it involves obviously housing and dean of students and UNTPD and risk management, and all the right players are on that committee. But I can tell you what other universities outside of Texas, since it's new to us, have done. And certainly these are the things that we are considering as well. One, it becomes a complicated issue because this becomes an issue of you can't make them self-identifying. So that's why we're asking legal about can we do it just for housing? Because one is some states single occupancy room only. So if you're a CHO holder, you go in a single occupancy room. Two, if you're a CHO holder, anytime you were in that dormitory, that residence hall, sorry, I'm using an old term, residence hall, you're welcome. Whenever you're in that residence hall, it is locked in that hotel safe. I just use that term because everybody kind of knows what that looks like. I don't know what the technical term is either. But it's locked in that hotel safe. So you are not allowed by rule, by policy, when you sign your housing contract and you're a CHO holder, to put it in your drawer, put it on your desk, leave it in your backpack. It immediately goes in the hotel safe and it is secured. And if you don't, then you're in violation. Third thing that some states have done, or some universities have done, is they have a centralized location. Usually it's at the police department, but they have a centralized location that is a secure facility, so they don't allow them at all in the dormitories. I'm sorry, the residence halls. Can you edit that film and just cut out all the dormitory references? All right. All the residence halls, they don't allow it at all in the residence halls. You have to go and check it in and out at the police department or some other secured location if you were going to be a resident in the residence hall. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
All right. So my name is Parker Lewis. I'm an RA at Crumley Hall. My fear that I have is that with the gun-free zones, it makes sense to me, like at the football games, you have people that are wandering down, so you know that there's no guns in there. My fear is that if the only thing enforcing it is just a sign, what makes that? I mean, I feel like that's going to be like a really vulnerable place if there were an active shooter. So how do you make sure that there's no guns at all there, basically?
Well, unless there is, some screening mechanism, there is no way to know. I mean, I've made the point before in these meetings that if UNT is a microcosm of society, there are guns on this campus right now, and we don't know. Probably based on the stats being carried by non-CHO holders, because nobody's been arrested in almost 20 years. That's a CHO holder. There is no verification process in those locations unless you have wanding or you have, and as I've understood from prior town halls, there are special high-risk events in which UNTPD is involved in, basically in metal detectors or in the wanding process. But in general, there will not be a way to verify.
Right. Okay. And I mean, I feel like CHL members would probably abide by that, but if anybody else just came through that wasn't an active shooter, I guess that's my concern. So.
Right. Thank you. Yes, and that's been brought out. I mean, somebody asked me the specific question in a staff one: do gun-free zones deter violent crime? And I said no. I don't have vast amounts of empirical research studies, but I said no. And the reason why I said no is because every K through 12 school is a gun-free zone by federal law. So any active shooter that has occurred in that on a K through 12 campus has been in a gun-free zone. So it's not a deterrent to somebody that, when we talk about active shooters, it's not going to be a deterrent to an active shooter.
I'm all full of questions over here. Does the university have, or will it have, a record of CHL holders? And the impetus for my question is, more than once I've reported students to the care team when I've been worried that they are suicidal. And whether I need to know whether they have a gun or not, which I am concerned about, but if I report them to the care team, would they be able to say, this student has not only been reported at risk of perhaps suicidal, but they also, might have a gun, and just give those who are trying to intervene with the student more understanding and knowledge of what they're addressing?
Well, good, the chief is walking up, because my thought is that only the police have access to that information.
So it's either myself or a member of the police department that sits on the care team. So the question is, do we have access to that information for care team purposes? The answer is yes.
So the question is, will you disclose that student that you referred to the care team is a CHL holder?
No.
Because, I mean, that, again, the active shooter, I understand, things are going to happen, blah, blah, blah. But I do really worry about the suicides. And if I'm approaching a student in a plagiarism case that he is now failing, he is losing his scholarship and his RA-ship, they have real breakdowns. And if I know that student might also have a gun in that very moment, that is really terrifying to me.
Right, and I understand that, but just to, and I know the statistics about handguns and suicide, but in the last month, our police department has most likely prevented 2 suicides. One, someone on a very high place on this campus, and the other one was walking across I-35 during rush hour traffic. So while it is an issue, and we know that, and that'll be something that we keep in when we develop this policy and go forward, again, it's like the signs. It doesn't prevent someone from taking some action in their life they want to. Probably most of what we deal with from the residence hall standpoint is an overdose on some level of pills. So, yes, it's a concern, and we'll know about it when it comes up, and we have a care team that looks at all these issues on a case-by-case basis and not, just a broad stroke of a brush. Does that make sense? Kind of,
Yes.
sort of?
I mean, but obviously it's not going to be by guns in the dorms, because right now there aren't supposed to be guns in the dorms, so that's kind of circular logic to me.
I think the scenario is student comes into your office, has a CHL, has the gun with them. You tell them they're failing the class. They get upset, pull out the gun and shoot you or them themselves.
Well, first of all, you won't know that they have a CHL unless they
Well,
tell
we will
you.
when they pull it out.
Correct. But
Well,
let me just share this. I know
You're
this
making the
is-
assumption that they're going to be a CHL holder. I would venture to say that if somebody's, this is what I would say. If somebody is going to pull out a gun on this campus and shoot you, they are not going to be a CHL holder.
No. I'm not. Look, it seems like you're saying that CHL holders won't have the same kind of emotional problems and get as upset and angry as other students do. And I don't think that anybody here buys that. It doesn't, just because they're a CHL holder doesn't mean that they're not going to get angry or upset. And I think that for faculty members, what we're saying is, so you have an angry, upset student who has a CHL, so they have easy access to a gun. It just has the possibility to take that one step further. I think all of us have had students in our office having breakdowns and getting really emotional and upset, throwing things, all kinds of things like that. So, I think that the fear is adding a gun to the mix could mean that they could hurt themselves. They could also hurt someone else who is in the vicinity.
No, I did hear what you have to say. I would go back to the statistics that were shown. I mean, I'm assuming at Colorado State, no, I'm not talking about, I'm talking about, well, if you look at 12 years of experience in Colorado, there's been no incidents at Colorado State. I'm assuming the professors there.
Any evidence, I didn't see any evidence presented from Colorado State about suicides or students hurting themselves or accidental firing of guns. I saw one staff member
Just-
take the gun out, but I didn't see any.
Right. So those statistics were regarding displaying or discharging a firearm. All the events that you were talking about are encapsulated within those two categories. And so my argument would be is that I'm sure Colorado State has had, and again, this is an emotional issue, I get it. But when say there's no data, I would argue differently. There's 12 years of experience in another state that are having probably similar conversations with their students. And I would argue that if somebody is going to pull out a weapon and is going to harm you, they are not going to be a CHL holder. I'm not saying that they're not going to be upset. CHL holders do get upset, but they are extraordinarily unlikely, as the data from Texas convictions shows, to commit a violent act.
There
We need the microphone.
Colorado is on campus, right? So, you know, I'm sure there's plenty of other students who have killed themselves or who have accidentally, you know, discharged a gun that wasn't right on campus.
Right. So I mean, now I think we're getting into Mo's realm now. We're getting into the dean of students, and we're getting into mental health issues with students. I mean, the data that was presented from Colorado State, which I'm sure is going to be the same data that we keep here in every other state university, is regarding displaying and discharging firearms on this campus, because that's what campus carry applies to. And when we're talking about suicides off campus and the use of firearms off campus, that falls under the dean of students, and I'm sure you have something to say about that.
Any data on suicides that were on campus at Colorado?
They would still fit into the display or discharge of a firearm by a CHL holder on that campus. So there's no evidence.
No suicides by firearm in Colorado.
By CHL holders.
Ever.
By CHL holders. You got to add that caveat to it. By CHL holders, and the answer is absolutely yes. There is none by CHL holders.
Well, and I want to make sure that we're addressing, because I'm hearing mental health a lot. And I think, Tracy, you know, you and I have talked a lot about students of concern, and a lot of people have. And our numbers are increasing, and we see that mental health on a college campus is pretty significant lately. And you're all getting triggers, warnings without guns on campus. And so we continue to do that. And so when somebody triggers you as regards to, ooh, I'm concerned for this kid, and you guys are doing it out of concern for them, right? And so I think that doesn't change. I think your radar might be a little bit skewed a little bit when we have guns on campus, and you're going to probably react. I think everybody's going to do that for a while. But I think the pendulum will end up swinging the other way as well. And so we continue to follow what we do now. You get them to my office, and we take care of them. And that's, if you see those triggers early on, that's what you're doing anyway. And so I don't think that will change.
All right, what about these young men who have to work in the dorm?
I suspend people. I mean, I know, I've been an RA, we talk to them all the time. I understand their concern, but we don't even know what's going on in the residence halls yet. And before we know that, I think it's premature to guess what we're going to do. Because the other thing is, a lot of policies, internal policies, are going to have to change with this new law. Would you agree with me? This is my boss, Vice President for Elizabeth Witt. So we have to look at, this is the big overarching one, and then we have to kind of go back and look at other things. And that's the residence halls, definitely. Greek housing, definitely. All of those.
This gentleman, then, yes, sir.
This was more for the faculty staff. I know that some of you are very concerned about being able to identify who has a CHL license. And my question is, how could that be beneficial to know who and who doesn't have a gun in your class?
You're asking me?
Faculty members, yeah. Like, how can it be?
Keep an eye on that person.
What do you mean by keeping an eye on them?
Well, okay. When you teach a class, you are watching the people in the class to see how they are reacting, okay? Some people are sitting in the back of the class, not paying any attention. Some people are in the class paying attention to everything. I think there are ways that you could know if a student was likely to get aggressive or, do something that was threatening to other students.
Because as an RA, I think it would be better just to assume that everybody has a gun and have like precautions and be like, have safety procedures that could prevent things, assuming that everybody had a gun and not necessarily identifying
Well,
everyone.
I'll tell you, in the class that I teach, if people thought everyone had a gun, they wouldn't come to the class.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes.
Can I respond to that just real quickly? The key piece I think we need to take into consideration is, one, Mo said it, Eric said it, the policy's not set yet. There's going to be a great deal of education that will occur once the policy is approved by the Board of Regents and it's implemented. And so many of these questions that you have, once the policy is defined, we will have the opportunity to make sure that we walk through every scenario known to man. And believe me, from a residence hall perspective, lots of crazy things happen in the residence halls, right? So making sure that these guys are aware of how they can be better prepared to do their job each and every day. We're not going to leave anybody hanging. That is not our intention, and I don't think that was the intention of the law either. So part of our challenge is when we have the unknown, it's sometimes fearful because we don't know what to expect. Once we get to the known, then we can start dealing with the ramifications and consequences of that policy and what we can do about it. And my guess is that we'll still have opportunities for feedback once that policy is in place and making sure that we're educating people in the ways that we need to. But the intent of the law was not, I mean, can I out you? Have a legislator in the room.
Too bad now.
Yeah, we have a legislator in the room, and so who has been listening to part of this discussion. And so the intent of the law was not to, it wasn't to do with safety. It had everything to do with the Second Amendment rights of people to be able to protect themselves, to be able to bear arms, to carry a weapon. And so that's the whole intent of the law. Somehow we are getting this, it's skewed with active shooters, and believe me, because of the news, it's a very easy thing to do to complicate matters. But we've got to make sure that we keep them separate and make sure that we create a policy that reflects the intent of the law, but also the opportunity to educate you all and make sure you're prepared to do what you need to do on campus, whether it's teaching, whether it's being an RA, whether it's being a student.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
I know a number of the members on this committee, and I know the challenges that they're facing, and I have a great deal of faith in their wisdom to do what they think is best, and not to diminish any of the concerns that my colleagues have expressed today. I'm hoping that as the policy becomes finalized or at least solidified, that maps can be distributed similar to parking maps. This is a gun-free zone, and not that that's really going to matter other than just an awareness for those of us who are on campus every day as faculty. I don't think anybody envies you having to make these decisions or envies the committee having to make these decisions. But I just ask that as the decisions are being made and the final discussions are being made, that the widest possible distribution of that information can be made to faculty, students, staff, anyone who's going to be affected by the implementation of the policy over which we have no control. Thanks.
Thank you. And I agree, and that's largely why we started in September, so that we can get this rolling. We have to get the Board of Regents approval. We meet in February. That then gives us 5 months or so to get all the training and get it widely distributed, and to make sure that we've done the appropriate distribution, implementation, and then also planning phases for when this policy takes effect.
I have a question. So we mentioned the intent of the law was to uphold the Second Amendment and for people to have the right to protect themselves, presumably against another shooter, because hopefully no one's pulling out their gun against a non-shooter to protect oneself. My question is, where is the data that shows that any CHL holders have ever successfully intervened in an active shooter situation to protect themselves or anybody else? Because what I have seen is people shooting shoplifters at Home Depot and shooting carjacking victims. And also, like, if you look at the France case on the train, people taking down active shooters without the use of a gun. So I'm just really curious, where is the data that supports that allowing CHLs on campus is actually going to enable that individual to protect themselves or their classroom better than they would without that?
I received a report, and I haven't read it as of yet, from one of our town hall meetings, and I wish it's a government report, and I can't even remember which entity did it, but it was a study of active shooters 2003 to 2013. And the gentleman in the room, faculty member in the room, was when we were at Discovery Park, cited statistics about who intervened in the situation. You know, did the police take out the shooter? Did the shooter take him or herself out, et cetera? There was a small percentage. I don't remember the percentage. He he asked that the report be distributed to the committee, and so it's been scanned. It hadn't been sent out yet. But that's all that I am aware of regarding data on CHL holders intervening in an active shooter situation. It is in that report. He told us about it.
Because I've been actively seeking that, so I would love it if that were made available on the Campus Carry website or something, because I keep searching for this data that supposedly supports this law, and it's really hard to find. In fact, I found nothing that actually shows data that this is going to make anybody safer. So if that report and that data does exist, I mean, I would be very interested in it being publicly available, distributed via the Campus Carry website or whatnot.
Okay. I think I'm sure we can link to it. Again, I haven't read it. I've received it. And he was citing information off of it and page numbers off of it and stuff. So I'm sure we could get it. Margarita is here. There's Margarita. I'm sure URCM, they're the ones that are helping with the website. I'm sure we can get that posted up there for people. And again, it is a government report where they looked at active shooter situations, and the part he was I'm sure it's this thick, so I'm sure it has lots of stuff in it. But the part the professor was looking at was who intervened in the situation. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Mariela Nunez-James. I'm a faculty in anthropology, and I have a question about process. I know you have commented about process verbally, and also in the PowerPoint, but I'm still really curious about exactly how the committee is going to take the information and the comments gathered at these forums and use them to make a proposed policy, and if there's an opportunity, sort of given the controversy and the voices that are not present or maybe might feel silenced because of the controversial nature of the issue, for the proposed policy to be presented to the SGA, to Staff Council, to Faculty Senate for a campus vote before it is presented to the President.
I'll separate out the responses. On the how are we going to handle the volume of information, really is probably more from a method standpoint, more like a content analysis, where we're going to separate comments into categories and then address those within the policy. There are some standard points within the policy that we received, kind of the bullet points from the Office of General Counsel of what needs to be included in the policy. So we know that, and so I see it as taking the comments and the input and then categorizing them by where they fit within the policy. And then we're going to have meetings every other Friday to discuss each section of that policy that we will propose to the President. Part of the policy will be boilerplate from the Office of General Counsel. So, for example, there was one statement, I didn't even know it was there, but the President has the ability to, in actions of war or whatever, to do something. I didn't even know it existed, and that will just be boilerplate that OGC, Office of General Counsel, will give to us, and will just be there. We'll work on the other sections of the policy, and so I see that's how we're going to move forward between now and December. To your second question, I don't think there is time to vet this through those three bodies that you mentioned before December 15th. I mean, we are talking about 7-8 weeks from now, and we have not, I mean, I'm not just saying it because it sounds good, we have not sat down and said, this is the criteria for the places that are going to be gun-free zones. This is how we're going to handle residence hall. We haven't done that yet, so we have a large amount of work ahead of us. So I'm concerned about meeting the December 15th deadline just to hand a draft to the President. If we were to include then review by all these bodies, we'd probably have to have it done in the next week, and it's just not possible.
I understand that, and I appreciate the work of the committee.
I'm sorry, what was it? Yes, and that's, I mean, yes, Elizabeth, I mean, and I mentioned that at the beginning. I mean, the committee itself, we were selected by the President to represent the campus community. And we do have 2 SGA. We have faculty senate represented right here, and we have staff senate also on the committee. But the ability to parse it out for the entire university community to weigh in on it, like we have with like tenure and promotion and stuff like that. I mean, as tenure and promotion, as an example, that's a 2-year process, and we have to have this thing in place.
I'm going to suggest something. Yeah. I'm just going to suggest something. Because we have representatives, and that's what we talk about all the time in Faculty Senate, that those representatives could take on the responsibility of getting back to their groups, particularly. I mean, outside the town hall. Mm-hmm. Say there would be a report to the Faculty Senate or report to and sure. feedback as such, so that at least we know what it is. That's a suggestion.
Right. And as I've said, our plan is, just like we are doing now, is we want to be as transparent as possible. But I interpreted your comment as having the entire university weigh in on the draft policy before it goes to the president, and using the promotion tenure policy, which I'm not even sure if it's enacted yet or not. I mean, that was a 2-year process. It's just we don't have time to provide that input, but we do have representation.
That was a different policy. It was an academic affairs policy, so it made sense to come back through faculty and others. But I think the whole key is having the representatives provide that kind of transparency in any way they see with their group. Have some kind of interaction with their group. Oh, you can think of it.
So we have Jesse here, we have Don Noska from Staff Senate on it, and then we have Adam and Chris, President, Vice President for SGA on the committee, and we have James Dale, who is from the Graduate Student Council on the committee. And so we have representation from all of those groups. Yes.
I'm still concerned about it, right? That it seems like, given the deadlines that and the sort of quest for transparency, that still there are too many ifs about how this process is evolving. And again, sort of given where the university has been with the question of transparency and where it should be, that this is a rather sort of volatile arena to sort of let these discussions and let this process sort of be up there determined kind of by chance. And so I have to say that in that regard, I'm concerned about what could be perceived as sort of a posturing by the committee and by the university when it comes to having these town hall meetings, meaning the sense that faculty and staff on both sides or multiple sides of the issue are coming here to these town hall meetings simply to sort of fulfill a check mark, right, in sort of the administration's agenda when it comes to implementing this policy. If we come up with a truly transparent process that is democratic in the sense of involving all of the voices and having some kind of say into what this policy is going to look like on the ground, then we can save ourselves a lot of time in terms of educating us as faculty, students, and staff about what this policy is. Meaning that if we've had a chance to be able to see, to read, to vote on the nitty-gritty of the policy, then we know what the policy is about, right? And we have some buy-in to it.
Right. I mean, I understand your point. I would just reiterate the timeline does not allow us to do that. And I can tell you this, we are taking the feedback. We're taking the feedback very seriously. We've done 6, tomorrow will be 7. I've got better things to do with my time and wouldn't be standing here if it was some posturing by the university. So I've heard everything everybody said over the now, we've done 6 of them, so the 12 hours of these things where I've stood here and given this presentation. And so I don't take it that way at all, but I can't control the way that people view it. The reality is that I was asked that question in one of the town halls because the bottom line is this: the Board of Regents make the final decision on this. That's the way the law is written. The law is written, it says Board of Regents makes amendments, amendments are final. So the question was, well, are y'all just, faking something and producing it? My answer was, if we're doing our job right as a 23-member committee, there won't be any necessity for changes. And so, in the end, the Board of Regents do have the say. But if we have taken all of the input and we have drafted a policy that balances the intent of the law with the need to maintain a safe learning environment for our students, then they will have no need to make changes.
I'm a university student. I have a vested interest in how things go here at the University of North Texas, and just a little background on myself. I learned to shoot when I was 7 years old. My father taught me, and I've been shooting ever since. And I can honestly say that training has given me a profound, or rather a unique understanding of life and death. And last year, my family suffered a suicide to a gunshot wound. So I have ties to a couple of different perspectives, or I can relate to a couple of different perspectives that have gone on today. But my question was, piggybacking on her comment, it seems to me that CHL holders are not, for lack of a better term, superheroes. They go through the same emotional problems that we all go through. The difference is that they are given training to be able to defuse potentially volatile emotional situations. And that's what the CHL training is supposed to accomplish. My question is it within the realm of reason or within the realm of possibility that UNT will take initiative in providing more training so that people that are put in emotionally volatile situations have the know-how and ability to diffuse something that could eventually be, or potentially be, dangerous or to themselves or anyone around them?
I know that, and it was kind of mentioned earlier, I know that just like Chief Reynolds said, we have safety and security seminars. I think those will probably take on a different flavor now because this policy will be integrated into those. And I think that they'll probably be more well attended because now this policy is concerning to people. And so, you said, is there going to be more? I'm not so sure that there's going to be more training, but I think that training will be modified to reflect the current policy. The other thing is that from a more training standpoint, I would just call it from an education standpoint, we're going to have significant amount of more over the 6 months between when the Board of Regents votes on this policy and when it takes effect August 1. And that's with faculty, and that's with students, and that's with staff, that's with everyone. We're going to have a major educational program in place. Anybody want to? Okay. Anybody else? Questions? Okay, it's kind of like class. It gets quiet, and then you know that it's over with. So, a couple things. One, thank you for your attendance, and thank you for your input. I really don't hope people take it as posturing. We've worked very hard on this, and as somebody told me the other day, I didn't hear the click when I stepped on the landmine when I said, sure, I'll chair that committee. Yeah, sign me up. But we do value your input, and so if there are other things that you would like to share with us, please keep updated on the Campus Carry website. We'll be providing updates on that, but also send us an email or use the web form and continue this dialogue, and we will be as transparent as we can be and informative as we can be in the amount of time that we have to get this draft to President Smatras. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.